Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where it's about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Promised Land. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So once again, I like that we are doing this, and I'm assuming it's going to be a theme that is continues as the season progresses, is the back and forth between the past and the present day, understanding everything that led Joe from where he was to where he is now, or rather Carlos. Let's start off with this past stuff first and foremost. We'll start off with the fact is that obviously learning how him, Margaret, Billy, and Letty all kind of crossed paths with each other. Because Letty actually, her and Margaret kind of hit it off first and foremost because Margaret asked her to be her Spanish teacher. It's like, because Letty was already teaching everyone there how to speak English, so Margaret kind of hit it off with her and it's like, cool, let's do this, paying her like $5 an hour. And I think this kind of speaks volumes about the circumstances around everything of, like, the moment Letty showed up there, it's like, oh, hey, like, Margaret told me to come in, I'm giving her lessons, and the lady that's the maid at the time, she's like, no, you go around back, it's like, we're under the same, you know, it is that sad thing of, like, right, she's in a better position, but I think she's also someone like, right, I can't jeopardize the position I'm in. I kind of know my place, but at least my place is higher than your place. So it's like, right, don't come in here and, like, you bring in all the dirt from, like, the vineyard and stuff. Because I think also, like, right, anything that's unclean falls back on her. So it might be, like, you know, self-preservation of, like, right, I don't want you causing trouble. Don't do anything because any backlight, like, the smallest infraction is going to screw me over. So, but I think that's kind of that situation of just, like, right, someone... You know, because it's like, right, we're supposed to be kindred spirit. Like, we're in the same circumstances. We're both kind of lower on the totem pole. Once again, the lady working on the inside is like on a higher register of the totem pole. But we're all at the bottom trying to make our way to the top. It's kind of essentially that element. But obviously, there's also a little catch up about the Rosa thing, too, of like not being able to get in contact with Rosa. It's like, right, she checked out at the hospital, understandably so, because she was trying to avoid getting deported back. But by the time, like, you know, and it's like, right, if she was back in Mexico, why hasn't she called us now? We kind of find out later on why that is, because it turns out she was taken by some very bad people. It's like, Jesus, like, every time you turn around, they're just scummy people. Now, like, immediately in that moment, I'm like, I wonder, it's probably the same people that they escaped from, because not everyone was dead. The other dude is dead. Carlos killed him. The other guy who ended up shooting her, he ended up with, like, obviously, like, glass shattered in his face, but he was still well alive, so he probably was able to track them down eventually. Like, all he had to do was, like, wait long enough, and Rosa would probably try to make contact with some people, and he made contact with said people. Just, she was on her own, sadly, and I think that's probably the irony behind it, because Carlos, like, wanted them all to sit together, because it's like, right, like, you could just as easily get picked off when we're on our own, and it's like, sadly, that ends up being the case, so there's all of that, but, well, the fact that she's calling Letty makes me wonder, like, was she trying to get Letty's help? Because, like, right, you pay these people off, they'll let me go. And that, once again, I start getting, like, some Taken vibes of just kind of, like, right, like, some sex trafficking and stuff. That's where I start getting a little nervous. I'm like, that looked like that could be that where they're trying to sell you. That probably could have been what the whole, like, original thing was when they were, like, capturing people. Like, this is probably the same operation. I think it's the same people involved. They just, like I said, I think they just caught Rosa. But I'm like, oh, God. And because it's not like Letty and them are in a position to really help. Not unless they're trying to use Letty and Carlos and Billy's position of being on that property to their advantage. Like, not unless that ends up being the case, or they're going to need money really quickly, so they end up having to steal stuff from the that property to pay for, like, Rosa's freedom or something like that. Once again, just spitballing ideas out there. But regardless, later on, though, it isn't just Letty that gets invited to the house. It also ends up being Carlos and Billy. Which I should also really quickly, since we were already on the subject of Rosa, we did find out that Margaret has a brother, so I'm wondering if he's ever going to pop up in this situation or what's changed in that time frame. Like, I mean, is he still alive or what? Because at the time, Margaret was learning, like, the Spanish words for brother and sister, so that's what kind of sparked all that. But regardless, Margaret invited them all over. Obviously, they don't really have any swimwear, especially for Carlos. He's like, these are the only pants I have, because they're saying like, oh, just like cut your pants, your jeans, and that'll kind of be shorts. But it's kind of like, you know, Billy's like, oh, come on, live a little, man. We're here. This is a great opportunity. He's not trying to be like too overwhelmed by everything, because he's like, no, like the house, it's okay. But they're kind of enjoying themselves. But then it seems like Carlos is a little bit of a sourpuss, because he is the one that kind of smacks them all with reality. It's like, oh, we're having fun. It's like, no, we're just wetbacks. So I'm like, jeez, like, but it's like, yeah, like she invited us over. He's like, don't you think it's funny how she only invited us over after her dad left? And that's kind of a whole point. And even she picked up on some of the Spanish. She's like, oh, he called me a rich girl. And he was like, yeah, you. And she's like, speak English. And he was like, see, that's my point. It's like, well, to be fair, she doesn't know Spanish. So it's not, she wants to know if you're talking smack. She wants to be able to understand it. But I think it was interesting. And I wonder what really drew, maybe it's because Letty having so much fun with Margaret kind of bothered him or something. Or maybe it's because he found himself kind of attracted to Margaret and it just made him feel bad. But either way, I think it does ultimately just stem from like, right, she's a rich white girl. We're like the help. And I brought that point up last episode of like, oh, that must have been complicated, because it's like, oh, like Margaret's dating the help. Sure, your dad wasn't going to be too appreciative of that. Pretty clear. With the fact is that he later on is like, oh, this is your, oh, Letty, oh, this is your tutor? Huh? Oh, that's funny. Oh, $20 to get blah, 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 and you're paying wetback. You're like, okay. So we see what time it is. So it's like who her dad is and everything. So it kind of feeds into that point that Carlos was trying to make. But it seemed like they were able to move past some of that stuff because they're around drinking wine and stuff like that. And it comes up pretty early on about, well, Joe being able to have a pretty good palate. He's like, oh, what's palate? And they're just kind of laughing about him not knowing what the word meant and all that. But it definitely showed like, oh, there is an interest between him and Margaret. I do love that like her dad showed up and like, obviously, like, everyone was freaked out, but luckily, like, the maid, she, like, covered for them and stuff like that, got them out of there, and it's like, yeah, like, Letty just came back and was like, oh, yeah, like, we're studying, like, I'm teaching her Spanish and stuff like that, but, yeah, you kind of probably see why, like, if Joe did screw over Margaret's dad, you kind of understand why, because his dad probably always thought less of him, especially, like, anything between Margaret and him. It's like, oh, once again, oh, you got with, the help? No. Because we don't know how long ago it's been since her dad died, like, how many of their children have been born at that time. I'd assume, like, by then, like, Antonio and Veronica were born, maybe I would assume maybe, like, Carmen was born, maybe she was just super young at the time. He just doesn't seem like the most inclusive father, so I think it is the situation of like, yeah, that probably like led to why Joe, like I said, if Joe screwed him over, it's probably because like Joe was trying to give him the middle fingers. It's like, right, I was always in your shadow, you always thought less of me, like I wasn't good enough, now I'm gonna prove you wrong. He even kind of like uses that same line later on when he's talking to Mateo, like, why, I thought you said I wasn't a winemaker. It's like, well, old man Honeycraft said the same thing about me, and look what I built for myself, just to kind of, you know, I'm sure he's rolling over in his grave, pissed off about what I've accomplished, and he didn't think I'd be amount to much, you know. So we'll see. I am curious though, what made her at the end hesitate when Rosa did call her though. What made Letty not answer the phone immediately? Like it's like, oh, is there a oh, right, because she's supposed to be Letty, and that's right. I was thinking for a second, I was like, I didn't understand the ending, but I was like, oh, okay, like, I mean, I guess you could have gotten around that, like, but she was nervous, and, like, she didn't want no one to know, like, oh, your name is supposed to Letitia, and it's like, oh, you said your name was Letty, and all of a sudden it's Juana, like, no, what's going on here? I get it, but it's like, you know, and that, you know, that hurts her the most too, considering like knowing the only person that could be calling is her sister. So, but even obviously we see early makings of like issues between Billy and Joe, where Billy's kind of like getting like acting all flirtatious towards Letty, and Joe punches him. He's like, you know how I feel about her. He's like, oh, but didn't I just see you making eyes at Margaret? Yeah. Oh, you all of a sudden remember that now, huh? So also like your coffee's stronger than your punches or something like that. So, well, I figured it was kind of going to dabble in that direction. Now, whether it's just a thing of he just legitimately has a thing for Margaret and not thinking of like that's why I'm like, how much of their relationship was like, no, he really does legitimately did love her at one point in time, and how much of it is like you saw an opportunity for more. Like, once again, it's like, what happened first? Was it Billy and Letty that made it you leaned more towards Margaret, or was it just you and Margaret, and it kind of forced the whole, like, well, Billy saw an opportunity because he obviously likes Letty. He even made a point like, right, tell Letty how you feel, because if you don't, someone else is going to come along. Now, whether he meant himself at the time, who knows? But, you know, whatever the case may be. So that's where we're currently standing with all the past stuff. But present day, we have Joe burning a whole bunch of photos, any evidence of the past. The last photo he was holding on to, it looked like a picture potentially of him and his mom. So the question then becomes, well, did he keep it? Did he throw it away? Because he even asked Letty later on, oh, did you keep anything? He's like, if you did, I'm not going to be mad at you. He's like, I kept stuff too. And she's like, no. It's like, well, we know that's not the case. We know she kept a picture of her and Billy, and it's inside that book she had back in the day to teach herself English and eventually teach other people English. But obviously this is in the aftermath of, you know, Joe is scared because of what Mateo says, even to the point that he tries to make things good between him and Mateo, because Mateo's trying to buy, like, a vineyard of his own. But, you know, Joe's like, don't worry about that. Like, you know, if you try to buy this and then someone outbids you, that means I'll have competition right on my land, and I can't have that, like, you know, competition right across from me. You know, I don't want you to bumble this. But also it's like, come on, you can come back and I'll give you this and that. But he's like, no. What you're really doing is you're trying to bribe me because you're scared of what I know. Like, I'll blab about the past, which I love. Later on, he comes with his mom, and it's like, cool. You know, he's like, yeah, like, oh, we're going to show up at that auction. He's like, I could always make people know about the truth about you, and basically, like, oh, the investors, how they feel about that. He's like, cool. You want to destroy me? That's fine. But I'm not the only one that's undocumented here. Not only Daniela, which, you know, they're still staying together. He's offering her his bed, like, even in the new place he was planning on moving in. He's like, yeah, there's a spare bedroom. She's like, no. Like, you've been staying on your couch. He's like, yeah, the couch is comfortable. It's fine. Which you can definitely see some makings of not only his mom and his, not only of his mom and his dad's story, but also his uncle and stepdad, and his mom. That story kind of, there's a parallel to all of that. But Joe was like, no, it's not only Danielle you have to worry about, your mom too. And I was like, and you saw the look on Mateo's face. I guess Billy never told him about Letty's situation. He probably blabbed about Joe's situation. I don't know. I'm assuming Billy, like, has all the proper paperwork. They're the ones that don't. So it's like, right, you blow up my situation. It isn't just Daniela that's going to get dragged into your own mom. Do you want to put her through that? So, like I said, it seemed like he definitely didn't know about his mom's situation. Of course, Billy probably was, like, upset when he talked about it. So, like, he probably blabbed to Mateo, trying to drag my brother, he shouldn't even be here. The only reason why he's here is because I got some fake paperwork to change his name and make him legal here. It's like, right, but no matter how messed up he is, he probably would never throw Letty under the bus because he cares about her too much. So, Mateo, when it came down to the auction, Mateo had to back down. And obviously, Antonio's sniffing around being like, because he asked his mom, he's like, oh, do you know what this name, do you know what this name Carlos mean? Like, he's like, no. She's like, never heard of it, but whatever it is, you said it bothered Joe a lot. Let's look into it. So he's trying to pump Mateo for information, but luckily Joe already got to Mateo. So Mateo's like, yeah, man, I was drunk or whatever. Sadly, that name is already out there, so he's definitely going to keep investigating to the point he's sniffing around. But by the time he gets to those barrels, because he saw his dad nearby burning stuff, but by then, like, all that stuff is already gone. But he does find the truck that Joe moved, and so he sees, like, the bullet holes that are now, like, covered up, and then he eventually moves the carpet and finds the bloodstains. Granted, none of it's necessarily going to tie back to them, because it's Rosa's blood, but it still could tie back into Letty. To be fair, it's like, he wants to dismantle this whole family. Who cares, like, what the aftermath is going to be? I mean, that's going to blow your situation up too, because you are his son and some of that's going to fall back on you, but maybe it's like, that's more about destroying his reputation. You think it would destroy yours as well, but I guess, like, hey, once mom has keys to the kingdom, I'm going to be set, I'm going to be fine. I just want to make my dad pay, but he doesn't know. None of them know digging up the past like this is going to blow everything up. Mateo's the only one who knows kind of the ins and outs, but even he doesn't know everything, so none of them do know the full story of like what led their family to be where it is right now, present day. But yeah, like at the circling back at the auction, Mateo tried to like up and up, but then like even at one point Daniela was telling him to stop, because to basically outbid his dad, he would basically have to dump all of his every bit of money he has, whereas these millions mean nothing to his dad. But then obviously you had Margaret showing up being like, oh, I'm in this. And so she was like, oh no, I didn't care about them. I just wanted you to pay more for something that was worthless to me. So he's like, do you like wake up every morning thinking about ways to kind of screw me over? She's like, oh no, honey, I go to sleep too thinking about it. So once again, we'll get to it, I think, probably sooner rather than later, but there's a lot of bad blood there. I don't know, I say sooner rather than later, but like we don't know how much of the story they're going to cover. Like it's probably going to be like long stretches before we get to like the meats and, well, I mean, I doubt they're going to do a lot of heavy bouncing around, you know, they're going to pick and choose what they decide to like, no, like for the purpose of the story, they'll probably determine like how much of, how quickly they're going to move through some of the past stuff when they were younger. Like, whether it's going to like, oh, like halfway through the season will we get to Joe and Margaret getting together and even being married and having children? Probably not. I'm curious to see how it depends. Like, I doubt they'd ever do the thing of, yeah, we're starting off at the very beginning and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, 10 years later. You never know. And then like bounce back to 5 years prior to that 10, you know, so I don't see them doing that a lot, but you never know. I would assume any past stuff they're showing is all going to be told in chronological order, so. But I do, at the very least, like that Joe does give, he's like, right, I'm not giving this to you, I'm renting it from you, whatever you make, whatever money you make, you can grow whatever you want here, whatever money you make, 1, I get 10% of it, 2, don't move out your house, your mom likes having you close. He's like, okay, 5% is kind of what Mateo kind of settled on. His dad just doesn't say anything and walks away. But it's also because, like, regardless of everything, like, it is kind of getting into what Letty brought up. I didn't talk about it, but last episode she references, like, right, you can never accept. He's like, what are you talking about? I never accepted Mateo. I made him the general manager. It's like, no, I'm not talking about the business. I'm talking about as your son. Because every time you look at him, all you see is Billy. Like, you know, all you see is, you know, something between me and Billy. So yes, that rubs him the wrong way. So yes, this is also to keep him quiet, but it is also the thing of like, right, like how can I do this to a woman I love? Like how could I try and like ostracize her child? It's like, right, despite my own personal misgivings and issues with it, it's like, right, he has been like a son to me. He is family, like, and you can't turn your back on family, like despite whatever issues him and his brother have too. So. Which, speaking of Billy, present day, obviously he's like, right, Letty, I'm sorry for doing all that I did towards you. We learned from Letty that it seems like Billy had some drug issues. Like, that's why he was like, right, I wasn't in a good space. I couldn't, like, me leaving you and Mateo was the best thing I could have done until I fixed myself. He's like, honestly, I never would have come back here, but, like, the parish sent me here. And he was like, it had to be a reason. Like, God had to bring me here for a reason. Like, there has to be, you know, but she's kind of like, no, like, maybe in this instance, God was wrong to bring you back here. So, I think Billy, like, found the light, like being, you know, I doubt he was a priest before he left, so he fixed a lot of stuff in his life, fixed himself up. So what Junior's going through right now is the same thing I guess Billy went through, because I love that, because like when she eventually finds, maybe that's why Billy offered like, oh, I can help you find him, because he knows exactly where like Junior would go off. But his mom confronts him and it's like, you know, Letty confronts Junior about the drugs and stuff, the alcohol and drugs. Is not, I was like, oh, is he selling drugs? It's like, no, because they caught him with some pills like last episode and he got in trouble. But even more so this time, and his mom is like, right, you're kind of going down the lane of your Uncle Billy. And she's like, her Uncle Billy was a mess. It's like, no, he was a very good, sweet person beforehand. We've seen that side of Billy, that good-natured side of him. But it's like, yeah, he got mixed up in alcohol and like drugs and stuff, and he went spiraling. So it's like, right, your dad will kill you, or he'll send you to like a a boarding school or like a military academy. He's like, you know, how about we bring your dad in here? He's like, right. She's like, all right, you're listening to me right now. So they ultimately end up going to talk to Billy later on, Father Omos. And he's like, right, like, I put in my word for you. They wanted to kind of suspend you outright. So don't make me into like, make me out to be a fool, because nobody makes me a fool. But, you know, Junior's like, why are you so adamant about helping me? And he was like, because I believe in second chances. And this is his second chance to make things right with Letty, potentially with his son, to fix things. Now, maybe that might include his brother. Maybe there's just too much bad blood in history there to make that happen. But for now, he's focused on his the people he cares about the most, and that's Letty and his son. Whether that includes, like I said, Joe, we'll have to wait and see. But I did love that line from Letty being like, right, your son is a drug addict. And he's like, oh, I'm going to kill him. It's like, no, you're not going to do anything. You already drove one son away from this home. I will not let you drive away another. And that's what kind of influenced, I think, Joe to kind of reach out to Mateo to make things right. Because it's like, right, how can I, like, I'm trying to do what's right by this family, but it's not fair for me to do that to, the woman, once again, the woman I love. So at the same time, this is all going down. You have Carmen helping Veronica, and even Veronica admits later on, it's like, oh, I underestimate you. She's like, you're not the only one. This entire family underestimates me, because she's the only one that figured out that Veronica did something. Like, it's like, right, there were key signs already, like the fact is you were late to a meeting. Like, for her, the biggest thing was like, Dad asked you to do something and you didn't do it. It's like, that was the biggest sign of like, right, like you were jittery at the party and stuff. So that's what made her decide to kind of show up there. But part of me was worried. I was like, do you think Carmen's going to try and use this against Veronica? I was like, nah, she doesn't seem like opportunist like that. Antonio kind of would, just because, and I think he will eventually find out and he will use it against her, just for the purposes of destroying this family. You know, trying to get what's his and his mom's. So, which, speaking of Veronica, Antonio did bring it up to Margaret about like, oh yeah, it seems like something's kind of off there. And it's like, oh, you know, he's like, you could always call her. And she's like, right. And like, so Margaret, she's like, it seems like she quote unquote left and things haven't been right between her. How Carmen feels about it, who knows? But it seems like things haven't been good between her and Veronica since. But then Antonio's like, no, you didn't leave. Dad ousted you. Like you were kind of forced to leave. So, he's like, Veronica might not see things that way, but he's like, I remember things as they were. Like, I see it for what it is, that like he kicked you out. He's the reason why you're not around. You didn't leave by choice, essentially. So once again, the truth is always somewhere in the middle, but I kind of get the feeling like there might be even more truth to like, nah, Joe probably did kick her out, because that was probably along with him snatching everything else away from her family in the regard of like her dad's vineyards and stuff. So, but regardless, Carmen actually ends up helping Veronica fix up the car. And it's like, right, let's not let Dad find out about it. So she's talking to our car guy and being like, yo, I'll just pay you off with just money. He's like, yeah, no one will ever know. It's like, ha 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 ha, funny enough. But she's actually very smooth, and even Veronica noticed that, because it's like, the guy's like, because she's like, hey, so how's the kid? She's like, oh yeah, look at him, like he's looking more like you so it's like, she's a very good people person. And so, like I said, Veronica's like, right, I underestimated you. And it's like, yeah. But she's like, right, we could go back to like your designs for the bottles and stuff like that, for the labeling. It's like, right, like, Michael could hook you up with some investors and stuff like that. And she's like, well, Michael already offered that last episode, which part of me was like, the fact is she's quick to dodge it. I was like, oh, he did offer that to you, so you think you would, but no. But she's like, right, talk to Dad and it's like stockholders or whatever. It's like, no, like, that's not going to happen. Like, basically you have to, getting them to change their mind and their perspective on things. It's like, that's pretty, but this is an opportunity. You wanted me to trust you and I did. So do the same thing for me. Like, I know what I'm talking about. Like, this is the best route and opportunity for you. So we'll see how that plays out. But things get a little spicy for Veronica when it turns out that, I say spicy, I should have just said complicated. Complicated with a touch of spiciness. Because initially she went to go visit the guy, Chris, who got hit. Well, she hit. And the sheriff shows up and she's like, yeah, like, whoever it is, if he dies, this is going to turn into murder. They're going to get arrested for murder. So, but she comes to visit him because it turns out he's like, oh, that guy Chris is awake. And you're like, all right, that's not good. It's like, well, we know that he was awake, like, at the time. He was conscious enough to see her probably, like, when she was leaning over the railings to check on him. Because from his position down there, there's no way he could have seen her car be the actual car that hit him. I mean, not unless it was like he saw her before he got hit. I don't know. Either way, he saw her, so... And he's like, oh, I saw you. So you're like, cool, cool, cool. So this is most likely going to turn into an extortion thing. Like I figured as much that this storyline is probably going to... She's all head honcho, got the keys to the kingdom, but she's going to be slipping because she's going to be stressed out about this. It's a big secret. At least she's not keeping it alone, but it's still going to be a problem. He's most likely going to, like, extort her for money. And extortion, yeah, it's like, oh, one payment. Give me $50 million. Even if you give him the $50 million... probably going to want more, like, installments. So it's like, oh, I need another meal. I need another meal. Here. Like, you'll be paying for it for the rest of your life. So, interesting timing, too, just because kind of went through that a tiny bit this episode in the cleaning lady, but this week's episode of the cleaning lady, but we'll have to wait and see whether or not, I doubt it'll be the same, obviously definitely won't end up having the same result, how that extortion situation played out, but it'd definitely be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. I'm excited to see. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.